Ladies and gents, we're back. Alexhandr is taking on Btyb88. Zerg versus Protoss in this opening match. We have 3 more games here to finish off the educational series that I was doing. So if you appreciated the last castover, you liked the more, exploratory, informational, educational, etc. Look into Cosmonic Brood War, which is, of course, the most ambitious project ever made for Starcraft 1. That is going to be a nice site, because we're going to continue that. This is a map called Otherworld. It is in the needs testing folder as of right now. We are doing our darndest to get more 1v1 maps, so this is a map by myself. And it's kind of in some ways, it's a meditation on the concepts that were at play within Megalith Empire, but hopefully something in a more safe and sane manner. So you'll see that there's a straight line between our players, but there is indeed also a rear entrance and a bit of like a micro base over here and stuff, similar to Crossguard, in fact. And the workers will meet each other in the middle of the map. So you can see that this is like a choke point with cliff advantage. And then over here, there's actually going to be a neutral anchor. And I've recently shaped this path a little bit more aggressively, so it's a little bit tighter. And then, meanwhile, of course, the map will eventually expand to the left-hand side, similar to how Megalith Empire worked. Except there's a little bit more room for something like that to actually happen than that map. So anyway, if you have no idea what I'm talking about with regards to Megalith Empire, then have no fear. It's just another map that we were talking about, a map that used to be played somewhat frequently, even featured in the first Ascension tournament. And this time around, we are going to be seeing a Quasar opener alongside a gateway. So very standard stuff. I think the one thing you can say about Quasar is that it's actually a little bit non-standard to see in most matchups as of right now. Now, there are some changes that have been made most recently to things like the Quasilisk to bring it in, bring it in accordance with some of the other units and other options. And Ben is trying to negotiate with his opponent to get out of his base. So that's amusing. So the Zethar cores are going to be going to the opposite side here. Just checking out what's happening with the map. This map is a little bit interesting because obviously you can take this base easier as Zerg if you're going to do a macro hatch anyway, but you probably want to take a base like this as the natural and then guard it. There's even a pylon being made over here for vision, so the Zethar cores will sink their claws into that. And of course, the Droleth is going to go ahead and be revealed. So he says fuck as it finned. I guess he's referring to the pylon. And there it goes. But he has an idle scribe out here that he should probably make use of. So there we go. He's going to go ahead and do that. As a general point, something that I would like to encourage new players to do is get used to using the function keys. By default, F1 through F8 in Cosmonic Brood War act as camera hotkeys, as they call them, like camera shortcuts, basically. So you, in the same way that you would save units to them, you would be able to do that with camera locations as well. The Ecclesiast does get completely surrounded, and there are actually 2 scribes out here for the purposes of trying to defend against this. But the 3rd Ecclesiast is not so close here, and I think Ben just had no idea what was coming there. So it does get absolutely slapped. The pylon does go down, and Ben is too busy typing to mount much of a defense. So I think he might just be conceding this match in a very anticlimactic turn of events. And that is the power of Quasar. If you are not going to respect it, the Zethar cores will finish the game relatively soon. And actually Ben had some right idea by having the units up front, but didn't really build the right kind of units. Like Ecclesiasts are good to support melee units, but by themselves are very, very fragile. As you saw, you could get surrounded easily. There doesn't seem to have been much of an adaptation or response from Ben, so definitely something where he wants to do better in the future. And the future is now. As we get back into things, it's Alexhandr against Btyb88, and once again, they are on the same map in the same position, so this is a true remake in that sense. Alexhandr gets lemon a lot. What does that mean for him? What the fuck is this pathfinding, by the way? Hold on, wait for it. Yeah. What? Why? For what reason, Lard? Well, Vika's gonna have a fun time looking at that. He can just move the worker. I'm not really sure what's up with that. But maybe we'll keep watch. Maybe it's that exact angle or something. I don't think so. I feel like this angle has been used before. But that obviously is affecting. That's some funny shit. Again, hey, we can see the neutral anchor this time around. Maybe that's something that V can take a look at and see, immediately understand what might be causing that, or at least have a suspicion. But I'm pretty sure if you moved it down, because they remember their position there, that would help. But let's take a look. Well, that one was... No, it's fine for Ben, so... Yeah, that's definitely weird. And rigged map, obviously. Clearly in favor of Ben, so he can take this for this game. A bottom spawn OP. something else that I can take a look at. I don't remember having this problem, though. I think maybe it's like this magic position here that started it all in the top left with, you know, something like that. Maybe there's something to that, you know. You never know. That being said, the Drollev is on the way. We'll confirm it is yet another gateway opener. And for Alexhandr, who has spent a decent amount of time harvesting gas, has gone for a Quasar first. But that obviously got delayed because of the gas mining. And then, even still, he doesn't have enough minerals to go into a Kagrant and then into a, you know, a Larvosk, if that's the plan that he wants to make. So there it is. Kagrant coming. A fairly standard opener, but if you're going to harvest for a Quasar, you know, you want to get the Quasar and then the Kagrant and then probably start harvesting gas. Or maybe as you're throwing a worker onto the Quasar, that's when you would transfer to gas. That's what I think, anyway. So it will be an Ecclesiast first once again for Ben, using his excess minerals and some gas to get a Cenotaph. That's 125 minerals and 50 gas. So it's not a small investment. But in theory, this will be Legionnaire plus... yeah, Legionnaire plus Ecclesiast. And if the Ecclesiast will catch this worker, there you go. He used Cliff Advantage. But there's going to be a bunch of Nathrakors this time around. Now, the Ecclesiast is in an okay spot versus this, but this time around, he built a Zealot for fear of the Quasar, right? He can see the Quasar. He's actually killing workers. Alexhandr is getting absolutely owned by that. He's turbo-punked. The Ecclesiast should have then... yeah, okay. I think Ben is doing the right move here. He's getting a Hierophant from the Cenotaph. He can order up another Ecclesiast. It's going to be a little bit, and he needs to try to micro his little heart out with this Ecclesiast before the Hierophant finishes. But the Zealot is on the way, specifically to try to harass workers. And, or at the very least, maybe he'll stand guard. He's actually pulling it back now. The Ecclesiast is here. The reaction is actually instantaneous. And he can keep his scribes healthy a little bit with the benefit of the Ecclesiast passive. In fact, not a single scribe has actually gone down yet, and this Nathrakor is good as dead if a little bit of ore blocking happens with the Hierophant. Unfortunately, now the Ecclesiast is blocking him, but it does end up getting worked out. Okay, so now the units are amassing. There's going to be 3 Nathrakors and 6 Zethrakors for this fight. One of them did not come with. There it is. And yeah, this attack force is well suited to deal with this. And you can see here the Hierophant's value adding on quite a bit of efficacy. So the Hierophant is going to try to get focused down. It does have 1 armor, but that is ignored by all of the units here. So not really any worries there. However, again, this is a uniquely melee composition, and Ecclesiasts are going to keep the shields very, very much alive. So that was a very ineffective option there. Very aggressive early commitment. And this is another thing, right? Like, flash shielding exists, and Ecclesiasts heal shields for all allies within the area of their target attack. Like, if you attack an Nathrakor and it's in melee range, or a Zethrakor and it's in melee range, all of the units around that Zerg unit that's being attacked in that case are going to get +5 shields, which is going to proc flash shielding. So the next attack has to stop the... And with Zethrakors and Nathrakors, I mean, that's pretty common, so it's not really the end of the world, but it does mean that your focus fire has to be really sublime, and it doesn't really seem like the Hierophant was going to be super aggressively focused down. You can see these Ecclesiasts have 7 kills between them, and then the Hierophant itself only having the 1. So that accounts for all of the units that end up getting smoked. There's going to be a large number of Zethrakors coming. This is actually a scary spot for Ben, especially since Hierophants obviously move faster than the other units. So the Zethrakors can easily start to overwhelm them if he's not careful. You can see he's already sustaining some HP damage before he starts to pull back, and remains at 69 HP. Now, the flank could come in, or he could just send his, remaining Zethrakors out. Really depends on what kind of gamble he wants to make here. He's... getting workers, but has a circuit at home he can fight around if that's going to be something that Ben tries to go for. So in this position, Alexandr's kind of in the dark. He doesn't know where the enemy units are. He's going to start to try to move back and then try to dive in. This Ecclesiast is not long for this world, except for the fact that for some reason Alexhandr decided to just not attack. I don't know what was going on there. He definitely could have picked off a couple of the Ecclesiasts since they're, one of them is very, very low now. Or maybe try to focus down on the Hierophants or something, just thin the herd of this attack force a little bit. And, Ben's doing the right thing. Whoopos. Made wrong unit. That's true. I don't know what that means exactly. Maybe he was going for Quasies or something. So the Ecclesiast should fall here. There's actually one of them that gets micro to the back line by Ben. Really no damage dealt to the workers, but that's going to change now that all of the other units died. And again, like, the lack of focus fire onto the Ecclesiasts, it's a really confusing sight. He is making more Kagrants. He didn't mutate that into a Circuit. He has the money to. Ben, meanwhile, floating 600 minerals. The workers... everlasting here. One of them will finally die. Another one as well. They make that 3. And yeah, the Kagrant is going to be the next one. LMAO. Ah, yes. The classic move. Yeah, as Zerg, you definitely need to be somewhat judicious about that. But he's not mining again, so he's busy typing, right? And I don't know what's going on here. He's retasking his workers. He's got an idle one up there. He's lost 2 Zethar cores for free. I honestly think he could have even, like, you know, you got to be aware that, like, if the Zealots are back here, you know, obviously at this point, you know, this game's pretty much toast, right? There's like more units being made, a micro base expansion, which is a little confusing, but you know what? Ben is ahead enough that he can do that. If he just wants the gas and he wants it a little bit safer, then that's definitely something he can do. You know, he's coming out with the not really the big guns, but the annoying guns, you could say, the Legionnaire guns. Still 1 idle worker. Above that, we get some spinning dancing going on here. There you go. Nudged to the right direction by the eggs. And now he can surround and try to pick this force off, but he's still scared for some reason. I guess he's trying to lure them into the circuits. And he is somewhat successful. Somehow Ben allowed that. But yeah, at this point, the reinforcements are in, and he only has Zethar cores. So his opportunity to hold here was unsuccessful. And even then, he really botched even that engagement. So really, pretty much every engagement here from Alexhandr could have been better. Obviously, the choice to attack with Nathar cores and Zeths is like, you know, him sort of learning how powerful the Protoss units can be and like where he needs to focus his target selection. And this whole match is really a lesson in target selection. The Ecclesiasts are vulnerable, and a lot of the times Ben's positioning made them very, very possible to be sniped. They're also expensive in terms of their mineral and gas cost this early in the game. It's 75.50. It's not nothing, right? So it's definitely something to keep in mind that, you know, they take a while to even train, let alone accrue resources for. And considering how fragile they are, yeah, sure, they pay for themselves if they stay alive, but they won't necessarily do that. And you can only spend so many workers on defenses before you're just grossly behind. So more workers are now dying. A couple of them are still idle, and the Zethar cores are going to come in. He might even be able to clean this force up, but more units are coming in from the back. Zealots obviously keeping alive thanks to the Ecclesiasts, which are not being focused down even still. And yes, definitely, I mean, I don't mean to rag on him, you know, I'm just pointing out these things that like need to be needle point focused on when you're taking fights with Protoss. Particularly with melee units, you're playing into the hand of the Ecclesiast. The Ecclesiast can then use a lot of its advantages to give Ben the upper hand in these fights, and that's exactly what we saw in that match. So 1-1 for this particular set. Let's see who comes out on top in the third and final match. So we're headed to a 4-player map now, with Ben once again rolling Terran, Alexhandr going into Zerg yet again. He's a Zerg main. Now, Ben has made this map. This is called Quasar Quartet. It's like I said, a 4-player map. We get to see, you know, a whole host of other things. You know, we very, very wide bridges here into the natural, which is going to be hard to defend most likely. But this base is actually very easy to take because obviously it's landlocked in that sense. Now, 4-player maps have been something of a bugbear, you could say. I always like the idea of 4-player maps, but in Cosmonarchy Brood War, especially at this level of skill, it's exceptionally difficult to for newer players and for lower skill players to play safe. And there are so many more options. I think this happens even in 4-player maps in 1v1 Starcraft, like Classic. But in Cosmonarchy Brood War, obviously, you're in a weird spot where the what you're going to end up seeing a lot of the time is, oh, I scouted my opponent, you know, late, and then they did some like really aggressive or greedy strategy or something, and then got ahead because I just scouted them last. And that level of variance is something that, you know, just comes with the territory. So one such example could even happen in this case. Ben will scout correctly, but he will be seeing a Zorkish Shroud when he gets there, and he has gone Stockade, as well as a second one before any military units. And, you know, maybe on a 4-player map, this is a little bit more acceptable. There's like more space to travel and stuff. And he didn't get scouted first by his opponent, although he might not know the scout timings. But, you know, in this particular case, he's piping instead of building workers. So, you know, again, this is not necessarily like I'm taking this match super serious for, you know, the future of my competitive games and legacy and stuff goes that way. And yeah, like, it's not that this game doesn't rely on your skill or whatever in that sense. Like, not this particular match, right? This is like the players learning, their players trying to play Terran and stuff. Now, Alexhandr, he's seen the mystery meat moves, so he knows that he has to attack in. And, you know, Ben is doing a good job here by not, I mean, even if he was planning on cheesing, by not just like idling at this level of skill, that can be a phantom, right? That can be like a fake, like, oh, I'm just not really paying attention to my worker. Meanwhile, he's actually lying in wait, and you need to rescout him, and that loses more mining time. So, you know, he could certainly start an anchor now, for example, and see what happens there. Now, his Mavericks will, of course, take care of business when this Droleth starts to come up the ramp. And, you know, once again, this is something I commented on in the match against Benno. The Droleth was not looked at before the, you know, before the ramp it was even reached, right? He only responded to it when it became attacked. You can tell by his screen position. I think maybe the Mason will have seen the Gorger Core there, so we'll have to see what the response is. A whole host of Mavericks, and there is an anchor in the back line, so that's actually going to be very helpful. But there's no Watchdog, and Watchdogs are definitely king against stuff like lone Gorger Cores or low numbers of Gorger Cores. So we're going to see how the response, what the response is from Ben. He's going to instantaneously garrison it. He'll go ahead and sacrifice one of the Mavericks, and he will lift off the anchor. And now at this stage, you know, the Gorgon Core doesn't really know what to do. He saw the anchor. He can't really attack or harass the workers, so he has to consider what else he might be able to do. More Mavericks are being made. Obviously, with the selection extender, you can afford to do stuff like that. And the second military unit will be a Lekizalisk, followed by another one, actually. So double Lekizalisk follow-up. And there is a Watchdog, which is actually, you know, not going to be super useful at this stage since there is no Gorgon Core recommit, but he doesn't know that. At the same time, what you can at the very least do with the Watchdog is you can like lift it off and use it to actually land in tight spaces to uproot the Lekizalisk once it burrows, but there's no star pad, even though there's almost 300 gas here for Ben. He's been harvesting gas for all the game, but he hasn't spent a single cent of it, so it'll be a Vestry now. He should stim onto that Lekizalisk, but he's a little bit slow to the punch, so now he can just wait for the you know, again, he can... well, this is the point. Yeah, he could have stimmed on that a little bit sooner. He's actually going to go ahead and try to stand on it, which is risky, but he will actually get away with it. And this is what I'm saying. Like, even in that particular case, like that, you'd think, you look at that, like, what the fuck? He's a madman. How would he ever do that? What a gambit. But actually, you can just do that. So, you know, he's going to go ahead and get a cleric to heal up the wounded soldiers, add a third stockade, and maybe a fourth one even, because he's got a lot of money. No need for a star pad, apparently, even though he's, again, got 300 gas. And he'll be going on and adding more workers eventually, I'm sure. A Quasrock is going to be the switch here, and this is actually not too bad. Like, if you go Zoriustaleth, Zethercore, Quasi, or something like that, I mean, it's very mineral heavy. But you could do something like that. You could obviously do, like, Lekizalisk Zethercore, or Lekizalisk Nathercore, or something like that. It could definitely be a thing. He does have to be careful on the approach. He's doing well to just sort of burrow around the extremities, and just based on the camera positioning here, it doesn't look like Ben either noticed it or like saw it on the minimap at all. Like maybe the minimap didn't even reveal it, right? It doesn't look to be the case anyway, judging by the way that these circles would transit. Yeah, I think at that point it would just be barely out of range. So, you know, beginner's luck, good game sense, who knows? But there is finally a star pad coming. And he manages to get out with only a single Maverick loss, so that's actually not too bad. His cleric is wounded, so he should definitely get a second cleric. Try to support that. And an Ovaleth is on the way to reveal the high ground, so this is a good move as well. I mean, you could go Nathercores, but they have lower vision range. The other thing the Ovaleth can obviously do is just pick up one of these Lekizalisks and bring it to the back line. There's nothing in this anchor, so it's just for show right now. There are some Achmeds, which is not a bad shout either, considering how durable they are. If you can get onto the Lekizalisk, you can rend its armor with the Achmed, and obviously Harakans, when they do attack, they rend armor. They now have 80 HP, so the Lekizalisk will take, since it does a return spine after attacking, it's dealing 30 damage a shot. It will actually take 3 shots to fully kill it. So there is that, of course. It would be 3 full returns for one. So technically, if you get the perfect surface area... Oh, there goes the cleric. The perfect surface area here for the Lekizalisks would definitely mean something like that, right? He definitely wants to be careful here. There's still there is an Anseal out, but it's not on the front lines. Now he can use this opportunity to try to engage downward here. But he's doing a little bit of a split move. The Harakans are trying to do some work here, and 2 of the Lekizalisks have already gone down. The Zethercores, I mean, they don't have any armor anyway, so the armor rend isn't going to be too consequential there. There's 2 clerics out now, despite losing, you know, one of them earlier. That definitely hurts, but it allows him to heal up his units and to go for another round shortly. And there is only one Lekizalisk, right? Everything else is just Zeths. There is an expansion out for Alexhandr. This could be a fairly, you know, maybe a little bit of a longer game. And what is being shown here, actually, is that there is no anti-air whatsoever. So the Anseal can just comfortably spot the Lekizalisk. Now, again, it doesn't really defend against their splash, so it doesn't really matter as much in that context. So we're going to have to wait and see what Alexhandr wants to do for the engagement. Obviously, you can select the Mavericks and stim them. Harakans do not have stim in Cosmonic Brood War. And so he's going to go ahead and try to move out, maybe pursue the Ovaleth. Obviously, that's not going to be too much. And actually, the Zethercores are blocking the Lekizalisk there, so he's going to have to be somewhat careful. He can go ahead and even pick off these extra ones. At least one of them will end up going down. So it's not much, but, you know, forces him to be a little bit more on the defensive. Now the Bio Ball can come around. This is actually looking like classical TVZ, except with obviously Hurricanes a lot earlier than you would see Fire Bats. And if Ben tries to position them a little bit well, you know, he can obviously use this. Again, there's still no anti-air, but there are 2 more Lakissilisks coming. So realistically speaking, getting onto that Lakissilisk is going to be a big deal. The Zoroastriath is obviously taking a lot of fire. It's actually just been tasked onto the ramp, or the bridge rather, it looks like. More Lakissilists are hatching and starting to burrow. A lot of these units are getting very, very wounded. And the Zoroastriath is, funnily enough, blockading the exit, which is kind of funny. So the Anseal will go ahead and protect that from, you know, one of the very, very low HP Mavericks from dying. But there's so many Lakissilists here that you're going to want to go for some sort of switch. And indeed, you know, it is going to be a Fulcrum. Again, there's 0 anti-air. I mean, now there's some Quasis out. But you could realistically go for, like, Wraiths to just start picking off the Lakissilists because you detect them with the Anseal. So I think that would make a big difference. There's a lot of Achmeds out, boys. A lot of Achmeds. I like where Ben is going with this. But again, you know, he's aware now that his opponent does indeed have an expansion mining. Similar worker counts, but the main problem here is that there's no quarry. So, I mean, at the very least, Ben hasn't lost workers, so it's not like he needs to replenish them. He is adding more star pads, so I think he is going to be going for the Wraiths. And that is definitely going to help him. But I think we've stabilized into a bit of a longer game. We're getting the 3rd Tier 1 structure out here for Alexhandr, so he'll have access to the entire Tier 1 tech tree. Again, all what is it? 10 units, technically, in terms of combat. Here come the Hurricanes, but they're not necessarily spread out very well. One of those Lakissilists is already dead. The other one taking damage underneath the Zoroastriath. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up falling, but it seems to be just barely alive. Not taking up any auto attack priority. 1 more Maverick shot would have done it, I think, or 2 more Maverick shots would have done it. And that was just a massacre. Yeah, okay, a lot of Zoroastriath, or a lot of Zethicors died, maybe 1 or 2 Zoroastriaths. But at this stage, we are looking at a decisive W out of Mr. Alexhandr. He's got plenty of options here. He should reburrow the Lakissilists, because obviously they regenerate twice as fast while burrowed, but, you know, he's going to actually move across the map instead of staying at home. And I don't mind that, you know, keep up the pressure, you know, as long as you're aware of your limits. There hasn't really been much tech scouting, so he doesn't really know, is there a Fulcrum out? You know, we know that, and there is a Goliath out. That'll help versus the Gorger Core, and I suppose it'll help with sustained damage versus some other things, and there's even some Cyprians out to try to dissuade this. So actually, Alexander's immediately falling back. The Cyprians with cliff advantage will outrange the burrowed Lakissilists, so that is something to keep in mind. Meanwhile, Star Pads are amassing Wraiths in the background. There's really only 3 of them right now, both Star Pads and Wraiths. And an expansion is being taken, Ministry as opposed to Treasury. So Ben is looking to make sure that he stays aloft here as opposed to taking it for tempo. Treasury obviously has almost half the HP, a little bit more than half the HP of a Ministry. And in that context, it's obviously quite significantly less durable. And it can't train Masons. So there's like reasons to take it and reasons to not. Some Zethicors coming out. More Zoroastriaths. Consolidating a lot of durability here. Hurricanes are going to test the waters. Nothing connecting just yet, besides maybe on one of them. Just seeing where things are. Gorger Cores are out now, as well as the 2 Quasis. So, you know, the air units are going to be in a little bit of a pickle if they try to just blatantly scout across. Now, there are something like 6 Lakissilists with this army, but the Zoroastriaths, one of them has already fallen. Gorger Cores are absorbing a lot of damage. He's traded, you know, a Zethicor Azorius for 2 Hurricanes. So far, Ben is going to be in a better position. He's reinforcing over time. He does have 3 more Wraiths coming. A little bit slower than I would have liked on that in terms of spending his money. And he has a lot of production structures, but can't spend a lot of his money just yet. So the Lakissilisk's taking a little bit of a staggered approach. One of them is going to be burst down, and then I guess the engagement is just going to go ahead and take place for both players, committing to it either way. Yeah, the Cyprians are doing a lot of splash damage here, but the Hurricanes are all gone, so the armor rend for the Zoroastriath is not going to be there. However, he fell back enough and didn't fall, you know, Alexhandr didn't pull the Zoroastriath back quickly enough. And in that context, that is going to eventually force the lift, but he paid for it with a lot more units than he might have initially expected. With the Goliath out, more Fulcrum units can be trained. In this particular stage, we are seeing Mavericks come out as well. Yeah, there are some Izira cores. That's actually not too bad of a unit choice here. Obviously, they do have 2 armor now, so they will block Cyprians. But I feel like with the Anseals and eventually the Wraiths to surprise, it does seem like it's going to be enough to eventually break this position. Here come the Izira cores. There's not really any Cyprians with this army anymore. The last one did seem to die. But the Anseals are huddling up and blocking any Izira cores from doing any damage. This Ministry can obviously lift off and fly somewhere else if he really wants to try to set it back up. Meanwhile, he does have a lot of Wraiths. These are kind of his ace in the hole. But the longer he waits, the more powerful the composition is going to be against him. I think at this stage, with Hydras and Izzy's out, I don't know if Alexhandr is going to be broken by a series of Wraiths. So instead, these are going to be dispatched out to the right-hand side here. They can burst down the natural, kill the Spraith, or, you know, obviously he can just instantaneously kill off a bunch of workers and then fly away. He does have enough rates to break this, and there's not really that many units out here. I mean, even the military units that are being made are just single targets. Besides these Izira cores, but they get burst down very, very quickly, and the Hydras were not in a position to help. Still no committal over here. The Ministry is going to be over here and start getting tickled. Meanwhile, obviously, a lot of the units here are getting killed. That's a lot of worker kills going down here. Alexhandr doesn't really have much left in the tank. His anti-air defenses were lacking in the main, and he didn't even borrow them until it was really too late. I think he's got one more worker left in his main, and he hasn't rebuilt the defense over here either, nor has he recalled his units to try to defend these wraiths. So I think this surprise move has definitely helped out, and he's even going to lose the Hacharosk in his main. I mean, at this stage, Alexhandr definitely should have, you know, fallen back a lot sooner. He's not necessarily out of the game. He is taking a third base, but if he loses his tech, he's going to be in a real rough spot, and he definitely needs to replenish a lot of his workers. He has a decent amount of money still left in the tank. He is starting to get more workers, so he kind of realizes that. The Zorkiz going down is a pretty big blow because it means that he can't replenish his stocks of, you know, trying to siege. He has an Ovolith out here, but it's not in position to catch these. And, you know, the Wraiths are still lethal. The Wraiths are still possible to not necessarily kill this army, but do some more damage, or otherwise keep his opponent contained. On the high ground, we are going to see the Ministry land. Terran army moving out down the ramp. Wraiths huddling up over here. One thing I haven't seen too many people do is you can actually, you know, give your Wraiths a move order onto each other, and only one of them will actually be idle. I mean, you can take that one and then task it with a move order onto the others as well. So that would prevent it in that sense. Nice Goliath. How did you even get down there? Nice Goliath. If you do that, your Wraiths are actually going to remain idle. So that in this case, the Ovolith was there for detection, but the you know, Alexandr's units wouldn't have provoked it in that sense. Losing this Hacharosk is going to be a bit of a challenge. He's trying to rebuild the one in his main, but he's given up this territory altogether, and the army is going to be pretty sizable here. Now, I still think the Lekizalisks give him an advantage, but he did unburrow them, and now the front line is starting to fall. Harakan's doing their numbers. Not really too many clerics here. In fact, no clerics here to keep the army healthy. Some vultures are out. Re-engage onto the army, though the Lekizalisks have tried to come back up, but now there's only one remaining. And obviously it could just be focused down, but Ben doesn't seem to be too interested in that. Some of his units getting caught on the Hacharosk meanwhile, but it does finally fall. And yeah, the army strength is not looking too hot. There's a second Lekizalisk burr that didn't come with the army that might have been able to make a difference there. And meanwhile, there's just, you know, Hydras being made, maybe some Izira cores here and there. And there's not a whole lot that can be done in this stage by Alexhandr, at least not to hold off that attack. And here come the Wraiths, just here to add insult to injury. And they're going to go ahead and, I mean, they could even burst down these Spraiths if they really wanted to. There's enough of them. They're maybe a little bit wounded, so they'd probably trade somewhat inefficiently, but it definitely could make the difference. I think the Harakan attack or tactic would have worked a lot better if he wasn't going up against Lekizalisks, but in that sense, it's actually better to have bigger, beefier units that take a lot more hits to die. Something like a Goliath, right? Because the Goliath will, you know, take up more space, and thus less Goliaths are likely or liable to be hit by the Lekizalisks. But in any event, there's only 2 of them left, and only really 1 base mining, 1 base econ. Built a lot of defenses, built a lot of Larvosks now. It's going to be a while before Alexhandr gets back into the game at this stage, and even though the Wraiths have been rendered somewhat ineffective, they can still come up and try to help with the frontal attack if that's something that Ben wants to do. Loads of gas here. He could almost get tier 2, but obviously he's in no position to wait that long. Probably should just abandon all gas mining for the time being since he has such a huge float, and instead go for straight mineral mining if he wants to get out of this one alive. At least for a little bit, right? Because he's pretty much out of minerals. And Zethar cores are not going to cut it versus the Harakans. That is an area where the Harakans are going to help out quite a bit. The front line is not going to be looking too hot for Mr. Alexhandr. More Wraiths are being made, so, you know, they might join up with these guys. There's no Ovolith to patrol for, like, Wraith flybys on that side. Feels like we're at a little bit of an impasse. And what better time than to take a sponsored sip and tell you about Ben's moving company. He's actually thinking about sponsoring a season of Cosmonic Brew just for that, just so that I can say, and if you need moving in New England. But anyway, if you're looking to do something like that, you know where the link is. It's in the bottom right. The absolute scenes here. Wraiths amassing on the other side. They've joined together, joined forces. They can and will join in with the fight, it looks like. Or maybe start to force some of the air units or anti-air units to start, you know, coming in here. You can see, at this stage, with this many Wraiths, you're starting to pick off the Cesians, you know, before they can really do too much. Even more coming down. I would just be picking off these Spraits. I would be viciously attacking the defenses. You know, if it takes you it probably takes you about 2 hits to kill the Kagran. So finishing that one off would have been advisable there. Yeah. Base and the whole map, in fact, feeling very small right now for Alexhandr. He is not quite sure what to do. And what do you do? I mean, in this situation, you're technically still in the game. Like, it's not unwinnable. It just feels like it. But Ben is not really, you know, taking a lot of expansions. He's mined out in his main. He's not even harvesting gas from his ridge, and instead using the double gas base over here. Wraiths have tried to sick the Ovaleth. Not necessarily a bad tactic, because it would allow them to move a little bit more with impunity, but it could always be replaced. And now he's just going to confirm that there are no other bases lying around. Looks like a Zethar split up the lobotomy mine. Some April Fool's suggestions were being put forth on the Discord server recently. That was pretty funny. Again, you know, there's a pretty fearsome army here. It's just a question of can he replenish fast enough, and he doesn't have the income to restock as fast as the now Tier 2 Ben Taberski. Getting starports, getting phalanxes to siege. Yeah, he could have closed it at Tier 1. Yeah, he could have, you know, been a little bit faster about it. But he's getting the tools to guarantee the victory, and remember that Ben is not actually a first and foremost Terran player anyway. The lobotomy mine meets a rather grim end. Anseal's here to defend the Wraiths from the anti-air defenses, doing quite well at that, in fact. And now the Hydras have evacuated the position. You know, honestly, he can just keep this going. He can just stay and fight. Like, his Anseals obviously don't have any more energy, but even though the Wraiths are not going to be as efficient, even though a lot of them are already wounded, actually one of the Anseals even gets focused down by there, which is not bad from Alexhandr, but he doesn't have the Hydras anymore, so he just lost a lot of his standing forces. If he had brought some of the Izira with him, instead of leaving all, like, this completely undefended in that context, then maybe he would have been in a better spot. I think at this stage, the Izzies will be able to mop this up, though. A couple of them might end up getting focused down. The Anseal will fly away, or will it? Yeah, it looks like it's just barely going to live. We'll see what Ben can do about it. He's going to path it around. Around and out. Oh, just in the corner. That works, too. It's going to be Madrigals as opposed to Phalanxes, so that's kind of interesting. You know, their default range, as you can see, is 8. Well, Kislesk is 7, so it's a little bit easier. A little bit. Not necessarily by much, but a little bit. Ben could also be expanding again, but here comes the starport. Gonna go ahead and drop a rotary, I guess. Yep. And the Anseal has returned. Watch over the battlefield and spot the Lakizelisks. He's built so many units. He's not really using them. Again, Alexhandr is now at a stage where he definitely is in a spot where he could be going for another base. He probably can't imagine that he's... It's hard for him to believe that he's still in the game, most likely. Now, if Ben was paying attention, he might have been able to see that the, you know, deploying them is not actually going to be... Yeah, exactly. That's the same question I'm asking. Scare. I am scared. Well, it's going to be... Yeah, okay. He's finally starting to get some phalanxes out to siege this position, but he can technically do it with Madrigals. It's just a lot trickier because you're closer ranged, right? Meanwhile, a lot more Anseals were made at some point. Not a bad shout. Some Sundogs. Well, in small numbers, they're not going to be too useful, but, you know. Off the Lakizilisk goes. Yeah, this is going to be real awkward here for Alexhandr, attacking inward, trying to reclaim the map control. There are so many Hyrokans, though, and all of his units are dead before the Lakizilisks even do anything. Now, the Anseal was killed in the meantime, so he's going to have to just do the awkward thing and step on top of the Lakizilisks to kill them, but it eventually works. I wonder where the phalanxes are. No rally points here for Ben. He's too old school for that. Back in my day, you played Dune and you could select one unit at a time. The dumbfire of the Madrigal here is not really helping him too well against the Izzies, but obviously he can still use it against the circuits. Alexhandr is reduced to shit-talking. Well, yeah, you and me. Yeah, well, what a exchange. Again, this is the kind of game that teaches you, like, the actual level of strength that you have is much higher if you use it well. And it really underscores the beauty, I think, of a set of differences that show up within certain play. Because when you're in the context of, like, playing the game, when you, as a player, are piloting a certain set of units, it's going to be different than when I do it, than when even a higher skill player does it. So, yeah, I think that's just another thing to keep in mind. Well, the Zero Core is just going to go ahead and get slapped. Obviously, the Ancials can charge on forward to continue to spot the Lakizilisks. Workers are being transferred over. Now onto a bit of a 3-base economy. The space very sparsely being harvested. Yeah, honestly, I feel like Ben could have actually thrown this game. It's not going to end up happening now that he finally built phalanxes, which you can see we've made some changes to, right? We've fully remodeled thanks to Darkened Fantasies, who's also responsible for the selection extender to begin with. But you know, you can see we get a nice little look-see, nice attack animation. Nice deployment animation in omnidirections, all directions. Just needs to hike those vehicles a little bit further forward. And then we're all good to wrap this one up. Well, off the Rokors go. Instantly killed. Kagra is receding. A sure sign of our times. Is it finally over? Is Alexhandr finally dead? Did he ever get tier 2? I feel like he must have, but I can't spot it. I mean, he spent a lot of his gas. Did he just spend it all on Lakizilisks or something? I don't know. I feel like I'm just blind and not seeing it. But nope, he actually doesn't have it. I don't know where his 1,000 gas went. Well, he tries to engage, and the Harakans are not in a spot to try to protect. One of the phalanxes has gone down. Another one is surely not long for this world either. And the Lakizilisks are also burrowing within range. But the Madrigals are here to do some piercing damage with their missiles. And only one of the Lakizilisks remains. Make that, well, one, because there's one of them back here. Some Zethicors are out. In theory, it wouldn't be impossible to try to siege this, but there's still more Ahmeds to peel for the phalanxes. And one of them is even in tank mode, where it has 4 armor. Well, one of them does get nuked down, but again, that was the trade of pretty much all of the Zeths that were had. Alexhandr does have a lot of minerals, but actually his economy is finally outstripping his ability to train units. But I don't think that's going to help him here, because even combining all of those, I feel like Ben's tech level would supersede him. Here come the Sundogs and the Wraiths mix, trying to clear out the Spraits. I wouldn't really advise this move. It's not very cost efficient. But, you know, I guess it provides some distractions. Where did the units end up going? Oh, they came back up here. Okay. You know, he could have made a Shaman a long time ago. Or, again, rallied his Fulcrums. More Sundogs on the way. Another engagement attempt. You know, honestly, Alexander's armies are in a better spot now. Obviously, he's going to lose all of the Izzies. And, yeah, there's no armor pen, so the Phalanx in tank mode actually works really, really well versus it. But yeah, he's thinned the herd quite a bit. Now there's more Cyprians on the way. And there goes the deployment, so that's no good. Obviously the Sundog's doing quite a bit of damage, killing a lot of the Zeths before they can really do too much. So it ended up paying for itself, and now some Cyprians are here. Yeah, I don't know. It's no longer clear-cut that Alexhandr is going to lose this, which is really sad because, again, Ben was in a commanding position this whole time. I really can't imagine how it would be possible for him to lose. But maybe he'll educate us, as I'm educating you about Cosmonic Brood War. Still no tech, of course. Not really any gas left in the bank, actually. He hasn't been harvesting any gas. He took my advice, I think, or these workers got killed in the battle. I don't remember which. Cyprians were not really surrounded, so most of them will even stay alive. And there goes another round of units down the drain with more reinforcements coming in. The phalanx count in particular is getting very high at this stage. Some Gorgons have been made, Ant Seals are on the way. Taking a moment to rally his units, not really rally his structures, but at least rally the units that he made. Something that Ben is trying to do. And again, I think you should probably try to get into the habit of like hitting F1. For me, that's going to be, I think as a witness, I can actually do that, which is kind of neat. I might do that more often. So, you know, you hold shift, hit F1 or F2 or whatever. So like now I have so I have F1, right, which is like my start location as a witness. F2 is the natural for Alexander, and F3 is this bridge. And now you can suddenly do that and just cycle between them immediately, which helps out massively for trying to navigate bases. And the other thing, of course, is applying buildings to control groups, because there's multi-select, so I will definitely work out a lot better. Hey, don't kill that phalanx. What did he ever do to you? This morass of Sundogs, Gorgons, Cyprians, and phalanxes, along with the Ant Seals, have finally forced a GG. Alexander, well, honestly, I can't even blame him for staying in the game, because, again, Ben could have thrown that. Maybe if Alexander had been able to play a little bit better and expand a little bit sooner, or cover himself from further Wraith attacks a little bit more robustly, he would have held on long enough to really mount a defensive move. So, hey, hats off. Since that was one of the longer games, we'll go ahead and see. 460 units produced by Alexander. Can you imagine? Can you believe it? And obviously, built way more structures with all the static defense. Ben, my man, you managed to take a dub. I guess it was, you know, you won the first game, you lost the second game, and then you won that game. So you came out on top, whereas the first 3 sets, Alexander was 2-1, with Ben only getting on the board at the end. So across this 6-game series, our players are 3-3. And is there really any other way to think about that game? What I hope to see in the next set of replays between these two, assuming they do some more battle in the future, is I'd love to see better macro handling, better camera control, unit control, etc. If you're going to go for those early attacks, you probably want to be able to execute on the micro side. And if you don't want to do the micro side stuff, and if you want to just try to hang out as long as you can and play a little bit more in the larger scale game and overwhelm with numbers, you know, just try to posture for containment and maybe posture aggressively enough that you can protect yourself and safely expand, and that sort of thing. Obviously, as Terran, it's a little bit different. Ben actually plays Terran a lot more forward than a lot of other Terrans would do, which is kind of interesting because it's just not something that I would think about. But anyway, it's interesting to see, and I'm definitely hyped to see improvement in the future. And of course, more people coming into Cosmonic Brood War and realizing, hey, the level of play isn't enormous for some of these players. I can certainly jump in and try to improve alongside them. And again, Alexander and Ben did show improvements from the last time we looked at them, so here's hoping that time number 3 will be even better.